Somewhere in the Alps, more than 5,000 years ago, a man is dying. He's been shot with an arrow, he's exhausted, he's freezing, and within hours he'll be dead and frozen into a glacier where he'll stay, perfectly preserved, until a couple of hikers stumble onto him in 1991. His name, or at least the name we gave him, is Otzi the Iceman. And when scientists finally got him into a lab and started examining every inch of his 5,300-year-old body, they found something nobody expected: ink under his skin, in lines and dots, across his lower back, his wrists, behind his knee. Otzi had tattoos, 61 of them. And that single frozen body rewrote everything we thought we knew about when humans started marking their own skin on purpose. Here's the thing about tattoos that people don't usually think about. Right now, getting one involves a sterile studio, a buzzing machine, a guy named Dave with a septum piercing showing you flash art on an iPad. It feels like a modern invention, something that belongs to biker gangs and sailors and college kids making questionable decisions at 2 a.m. But the impulse underneath it, the desire to take a sharp object, break the skin, and deliberately leave something permanent behind, that impulse is ancient. It might be one of the oldest continuous human behaviors we have direct physical evidence for. And once you start looking at where it actually came from, it gets stranger and more interesting than almost anyone expects. Let's go back to Otzi for a second, because his tattoos alone are a genuine mystery. They're not pictures. There's no bird, no sun, no animal, nothing decorative in the way we usually picture ancient tattoos. They're simple parallel lines and small crosses, made by rubbing charcoal into fine cuts in the skin. And here's the detail that changed everything. When researchers mapped where the tattoos were on his body, they found they clustered almost exactly over joints that showed signs of degeneration. Arthritis in his lower back, were in his knees. His tattoos weren't art. They may have been medicine. This lines up with a practice called acupuncture, therapeutic point stimulation, and it predates the earliest written Chinese medical texts describing it by roughly 2,000 years. Somewhere in Copper Age Europe, someone figured out that puncturing specific points on a suffering body seemed to ease the pain, and instead of writing it down, because writing didn't exist yet, they tattooed it directly onto the person who needed it. A permanent prescription. You didn't need to remember the treatment because the treatment never left your skin. Now, Otzi is old, but he's not the beginning of the story, just the oldest confirmed physical evidence we happen to have found so far. And that distinction matters a lot, because skin, unlike stone tools, does not survive well. A carved rock can last millions of years. Human skin, under normal conditions, lasts maybe a few decades before it's gone completely. The only reason we know about Otzi's tattoos at all is an extraordinary accident of glacial preservation, which raises an obvious and slightly unsettling question. If tattooing is this old in a body we only found because of pure environmental luck, how much older is the actual behavior, sitting somewhere in the archaeological record we simply haven't recovered yet? There's indirect evidence pointing much further back. Archaeologists have found tiny bone and ivory tools dating back over 10,000 years that show where patterns consistent with tattooing implements, alongside chunks of ochre that had clearly been ground into fine powder. Ochre, the same reddish pigment used for cave paintings and body decoration, shows up at human sites going back well over 100,000 years. We can't prove those early humans were tattooing themselves with it rather than just painting their skin temporarily, but we know the ingredients were there, the tools were plausible, and the impulse to mark the body, to make a visible statement about yourself using pigment, was clearly already deeply established. Let's talk about why. Because unlike, say, discovering fire, which has an obvious immediate payoff, warmth, cooked food, safety, tattooing has no survival benefit at all. It hurts. It can get infected. In a world without antibiotics, a tattoo gone wrong could genuinely kill you. So why would anyone risk that? The most consistent answer across cultures is identity. Tattoos told other people who you were before you said a single word. In ancient Egypt, mummified remains dating back over 4,000 years show tattoos concentrated almost entirely on women, geometric patterns on the abdomen, thighs, and chest, and researchers now believe these were linked to fertility, pregnancy, and protection during childbirth, essentially a permanent talisman inked directly onto the body. Among the Scythians, the same nomadic horse, people who apparently loved their cannabis vapor tents, archaeologists found frozen mummies covered head to toe in elaborate tattoos of deer, griffins, and mythical creatures, so detailed and so consistently placed that historians believe they marked status, achievements in battle, and clan identity. You didn't need to ask a Scythian warrior what he'd done. You could read it on his arm. In Polynesia, tattooing reached a level of sophistication that genuinely rivals anything we do today. The word tattoo itself comes from the Polynesian word tataw, and when European explorers like Captain Cook arrived in the Pacific in the 1700s, they encountered something they had no framework for at all. Entire cultures where full-body tattooing was a formal, ritualized practice tied directly to genealogy, rank, and spiritual protection. A Maori facial tattoo, a moko, was so specific and so individual that it functioned almost like a signature, unique to one person, carrying their entire ancestral history carved into their face. When Europeans brought tattooing back to the West after these encounters, they treated it as an exotic curiosity, a souvenir from the edge of the known world, completely missing that they'd just stumbled onto one of the most sophisticated identity systems humans had ever developed, and they'd been sitting on evidence that similar behavior existed in Europe's own prehistory the whole time, frozen in a glacier, waiting to be found. There's a darker chapter here too, because permanent marking has never only meant celebration. In ancient Greece and Rome, tattoos were also used to brand slaves and criminals, a permanent, unremovable label of status forced onto someone without consent. The same technology that let a Scythian warrior proclaim his victories let a Roman slaveholder ensure a person could never fully escape their assigned position in society. Tattooing has always carried this dual nature, chosen identity on one hand, imposed identity on the other, and that tension really never went away. It's still there in the modern world, in workplaces that ban visible tattoos, in the assumptions people quietly make about someone covered in ink versus someone who isn't. What's genuinely remarkable is how independently this all happened. Otzi in the Alps, Egyptian priestesses, Scythian horsemen, Polynesian navigators, indigenous groups across the Arctic, the Amazon, and North America, all developing tattooing traditions with essentially zero contact with each other across thousands of miles and thousands of years. Nobody taught the whole species to do this. It emerged again and again, independently, wherever humans existed, using whatever pigment and whatever sharp tool happened to be locally available. That kind of convergence is usually a sign that a behavior is tapping into something fundamentally, deeply human rather than a trend that spread from one lucky innovator. So when did ancient humans start getting tattoos? The honest answer, much like smoking and clothing before it, is earlier than any single artifact can prove, and probably much earlier than the 5,000-year mark Otzi gives us with total certainty. What we do know is that somewhere in our deep past, a human looked at their own skin and thought, this can say something. This can outlast the moment. It can carry meaning that words alone couldn't hold, a healing, a kill, a marriage, a rank, a grief. And they picked up something sharp, and they made it permanent. Next time you see a tattoo, on someone else or on your own arm, you're looking at one of the oldest forms of language our species ever invented, one written directly onto the only page that was always guaranteed to travel with you.